Let's get started.
Let's get started. So, the first question, I'll put it to you first. We're both going to answer the question. So, what is the best way to find out what the speaking market most needs in a particular topic area? Such a good question.
Yeah, this is a big one, and it really relates to product market fit. How to find out in the speaking market what your in your particular topic, what that topic is that the market is really looking for. So there's a number of ways that you could do this. The first one is go on any of the speaker bureaus websites and look at the topics, the trending topics. Many of them will have that listed right there. So just now, for example, we're seeing a lot of things around metaverse, a lot of things around collaboration, a lot of things around customer experience. So those are some big things that people are looking for. And then I think a lot of the art is then thinking about if you're speaking on a particular topic area, how could your topic relate to some of these areas? So even if you're not a metaverse expert, there's obviously there's a lot of interest in that's kind of hot topic. So can you think about maybe having a version of your speech that relates to that big topic? So that's the first thing I would do. Go onto the bureau websites, have a look at what's trending, and then reach out to any of the bureaus because they are speaking day in, day out to people. They're saying exactly what they're looking for and the different topics that are really hot just now.
Brilliant. I'd like to extend on that with regards to the speaker bureaus because so if you're trying to find out what is going on in the speaker market and what speakers need to be focusing on in terms of a particular topic area, a great way to find out is to actually sign up to the newsletter, the bureau newsletter, because they will often tell you a lot more in a newsletter and it will be quite specific. So sign up to several newsletters where bureaus are representing speakers in your area. The other thing is ask prospects, ask them. Ask your prospects, ask your clients. That's the best source to find out, what are you thinking about? So for you, creativity, what are the challenges you're facing at the moment with regards to creativity? What are the areas that you most want to focus on? And get them to give you the language. It's really useful. Social media, of course, is another great place. Follow your competitors, see what they're saying, what they're talking about. You have to know who they are first, of course. And look at what your clients and prospects are reading. Read the same magazines, read the same articles, go to the same sources. So lots of different ways. So we've had a question from Michael Rada. Do you think speaking about change without delivering tools of change is right? That's a nice question.
Mm.
So I think it very much depends on how you're talking about change, because I think there's various different ways. There are speeches where you want to give tools so that people can walk away and take action. And there are speeches where you want people to think differently or feel differently about a topic. And sometimes if you're wanting people to have a different way of thinking about change, you may be telling inspirational stories, giving examples, sharing case studies, and just having them think differently. So not necessarily providing a tool. It really depends what the objective of the client is and what you've been brought in to do. So I think it's not right or wrong. I think it depends on what you're trying to achieve. I don't know if you agree on that, James.
Yeah, I mean, this idea, can you speak about change but not deliver the tools of change? I think it's a really interesting question. The first person that springs to mind actually was Sir Ken Robinson. He spoke about creativity. He didn't really provide the tools how to do that, but he got everyone's mind. It's the most popular TED talk, I think. And it really changed a lot of minds. But I don't think you have to provide the tools. But once again, as Maria was saying, it really depends on the brief, what the client's looking for. I'll ask the client sometimes to give me a percentage. How much percentage do you want of big stories, inspiration, ideas? How much do you want actionable, tactical next steps? Is it a 50-50 blend? Is it 80-20, 20-80? That kind of gives you a bit of an indication. Let's get to the next question. So here's one for you, Maria. How do I go from speaking in schools to speaking to corporate audiences? What advice can you give me?
Right. Okay. So from speaking in schools to corporate audiences is quite different. I actually think the school audiences are probably tougher in many ways than the corporate audiences, but you need to position yourself differently. And you need to ensure that your topic is relevant to your audience. So a school audience will probably have a different requirement in terms of the topic area than a corporate audience. So you probably need to reposition a bit. You probably also need to add video. Many schools don't require you to have a video in order to get booked to speak, because more often than not, they don't have time. The principal, whoever's booking, hasn't got the time to actually watch a video. But in the corporate world, video is really important and it makes it easier to view. So I suppose the first two tips would be make sure that you're positioned correctly so that you're relevant for that audience. And secondly, get some video.
Yeah, I would say on that transition from speaking to schools and speaking to corporate audiences, the couple of things that immediately come to mind. The first is, I think with the corporate audience, they're much more concerned with ROI of your presentation. So you have to get really clear what is the benefit? Can it be quantified in some way? How is it helping this client? Really getting clear on what the outcomes are for the. And I don't think you have to do it quite as strongly for perhaps for schools. The other thing I would say is it has to be a fundable speech. And this is a phrase that David Avrin, a speaker, told me, which is it has to be something that you can imagine across the organization. Someone is willing to put money into, maybe significant sums of money into, maybe having to speak about this at multiple events over the course of a year. So that doesn't work. So you have to sometimes like tweak maybe a topic like resilience. You're going to have to change that. You maybe want to talk about something like anti-fragile, Taleb's topic, which appeals a little bit more to a corporate. So you have to change the language a little bit. And if someone's watching this just now and you don't already do any speaking in schools, I highly encourage you to do it. It's a great, interesting audience to speak to. If you're in the UK, you can check out Speakers for Schools, which was started by a journalist called Robert Peston. And that's a great program where they bring amazing speakers to speak for free in schools. And it's a great way of trying out material and seeing if your material works for younger generations as well.
And let me add, if you'd like to get paid, then go to School Speakers, which is started by Claire Young, former apprentice candidate, because you can get paid to speak at schools as well.
And also, I think in my understanding, Maria, and you'll know this better, a lot of the bigger bureaus in America, they actually have separate agents who focus on the schools and the college market. We don't seem to have that really so much in Europe, but it seems to be in America, they actually have agents that really know those markets.
Yes, colleges especially, and the Ivy League ones in particular, will pay very good fees for the right speakers. So you can actually do a tour of all of the colleges and make it quite interesting. You can do that, do America by college. That's quite good fun, isn't it? I'm going to ask you this one here.
Oh.
This is such a good question. What do you think makes the difference between an amazing speaker business and an average one? And that came in, I'm not sure if I think that was... Sarah Whitten. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Sarah. So what makes the difference between an amazing speaking business and an average one? I think we have to define for ourselves what that word amazing is for a start. Your version of amazing may be completely different from my version of amazing. Your version for amazing is maybe to give one speech a month and that's it. And that's great. And speaking for my, huge amount for that. Other speakers might want to speak 10 times, 12 times a week. And willing to speak for a little bit less because they just want to get their message out there in different ways. I think we have to find what amazing. For me, what an amazing speaking business is, I call an all-weather speaking business. That regardless of where the economy is, where the market is, your business is continually growing in some ways. So that sometimes means having components of your speaking business that aren't necessarily you getting up onto a physical stage and speaking. So it's about having maybe multiple diverse sources of revenue streams to your speaking business. The other thing I would say is to go, and this is a personal decision. It's not everyone's going to be the same on this. Sometimes I think to have a really amazing speaking business, you need to have a team. Because otherwise, if it's just about you'll get to 6 figures, maybe 7 figures, but you can't push much beyond that. So if finance, money, and profitability is a big thing that you're looking for, then I think that's going to involve other people or building very good systems and having good people around you as well.
James, you've answered that brilliantly. I love that. My exact same response when I'm thinking about the difference between an amazing speaking business and an average one is begin with the end in mind. What is amazing for you? What does success look like? If you don't have a target to aim for, you're a bit like that Monty Python race, with the people with no sense of direction. You don't know where you're going, and you don't know if you've made it, and you don't know if you've succeeded, right? So amazing means you know where you're going, and you're going to get there. And I think the difference between the speakers that really succeed and those that perhaps don't succeed, the ones that really succeed are totally and utterly in touch with their customers
Mm.
They know what's going on. They stay ahead of the others by asking the right questions, keeping engaged, building those relationships, and remaining relevant. It's very hard to have a long-term speaking business unless you are communicating regularly with your clients and finding out what's going on in their world so you stay relevant. So I suppose those will be a couple of things. But I mean, you could go into so much more detail, couldn't you, with it? But
No.
it is begin with the end in mind. What is success? What is amazing in your business? Fantastic,
So
fantastic. We've had another comment. So I'll pick this one up first, if that's okay with you, James. So what are the selection criteria for selecting a new speaker for an agency? So having done this many times, let me give you what my selection criteria were. So first of all, when I was looking for new speakers, they needed to be relevant to my client base. So it needed to be a topic that was relevant, or an area that was relevant and of the right caliber and standard, so they fitted in my roster. They filled a gap. And that might have been a gap that was in terms of a fee range, or it might have been a type of speaker that I didn't have, or they might cover a language that I didn't have. So they filled a gap. They had all their assets in place, everything, in order. So it was easy for me to sell them. So I mentioned video earlier. The video is important. They've got clear descriptions and headings for their topics. They've got a well-written bio. They've got good photos. So everything that makes it easy for me to book them. And they've already got experience on stage. They can hold their own on stage. They deliver a great speech. So that's some of it. If they're a bit quirky, a bit different, that's always interesting too. And if they're coming with a following, that makes it great too, because of course these days everybody's interested in people having some kind of following on social media as well. Many of the clients actually ask for that these days too. So James, what would you like to add?
Well, I don't think I've got this to add, but I have a question for you as relates to that, Maria. So, Michael, thank you for asking this about this selection criteria. In a previous life, in fact, I was talking to an agent yesterday, but he's an entertainment agent, not a speaking agent. And he's really growing he's actually looking to hire agents at the moment. And we were having this conversation about how he's building his agency. And I'd be intrigued to know from you, Maria, whether this applies. He said he always wants to have in his roster, he wants to have a few cash cows, people who are really well known. You could just bankable, you could sell them day in, day out, but they're not really growing in any particular way. He wants to have a few stars, people that the smart magazines are writing about, everyone's kind of talking about, they're doing cool stuff on TikTok. And then he wants to have some ones that he's just kind of working on really developing in very early stages. They're not there, and they're maybe not hitting the fee ranges that he wants, but he believes in them, or he believes in their what trying to create, and he's willing to invest that time. So that was him. He said he was always trying like how to get that mix right to make it interesting for him and make it strong for the bureau. So you got that kind of resilience. Is that something that speaker bureaus do with the agents? Are they looking to have that kind of mix as well, or are they basically just primarily looking at cash cows and stars?
It varies dramatically. You can't, it's not black and white. I can't say that every bureau is exactly the same. So some bureaus will be interested in developing new talent and working with them because they have a setup for that. Others won't. They won't want to take people who are starting out and beginning. So you have to do your research before you apply to a bureau, and you have to see what it is that they're looking at. And you can tell by looking at their roster, who's on their website, how they work. But most bureaus want to have a range of people, because if a client comes to you and they say, I want a speaker on creativity, and you're the perfect fit, James, but they don't have the budget, I'm not going to ask you to reduce your fee, or I wouldn't in the past, because I don't do this anymore, but I wouldn't have done that. What you would do is you would have a sort of a mini James, and you might even have another James. So you'd have sort of different levels of people who can deliver a similar topic and deliver a similar outcome. So you do need to have a range, and the bigger the bureau, the more people they'll have on their roster. And there's some bureaus with thousands of people on their roster.
Well, this is interesting because you and I are both fans of a book, The One Thing, Jay Papasan and Gary Keller. And I've noticed the way that they've built the speaking part, the keynoting part of their business is they have Jay, who's the main speaker, but they also have like 5 or 6 other speakers who give almost very similar kind of speeches, same topic, and are on different bureaus. And so I thought that's interesting because that's a way of basically really spreading your message, not making it about the individual, but making it about the message as being more important. So I am wondering whether maybe I should be going creating some mini me's
I think good. I think that could be a good strategy. It depends what your strategy is in your business. Every business has a different strategy, of course, but I think that's not a bad idea, James, to have a
Yeah.
mini you, because you've got, the content is valuable. So yes, absolutely. So I'm going to skip one and I'll come
Yeah.
back to that other one afterwards. So what are you seeing with regards to fees for in-person versus virtual? Are virtual fees still lower than in-person? And if so, what sort of difference is there? What are you seeing, James, for your in-person and your virtual fees?
Yeah, it's in-person versus virtual fees. It felt roughly that virtual fees were about 75% of what in-person fees were, very broadly. However, I think that's starting to change now because I'm having a lot of conversations with speakers who are now having to look at opportunity costs. So if they go and give that in-person speech, that means they can't do 2 or 3 virtual. So they're having to take that into consideration now. So I'm thinking what amongst the good virtual speakers, the fees will actually probably get closer to parity. And also for sometimes if you're doing hybrid now, or you're maybe going into a green screen studio or you're doing hologram, it's basically the same, if not more than in person. So I think it's a difficult. I think it's not quite. We've not kind of reached an equilibrium of things, and it's going to be different for different speakers. I know some speakers are completely moving away from in person and just going virtual. I know other speakers who hate doing virtual, and they're making their virtual fees twice what their in person fees are. So I don't think there's any particular right and wrong, but I am seeing probably very broadly 75% is of your in person fee is what the virtuals are coming in at.
Yeah, and actually, I was going to say 80% is what I'm seeing. So we're very similar there. And the challenge at the moment with virtual and in person is exactly what you said, is that if you accept an in-person event, you could potentially be turning down 2 or 3, because what happens with the in-person, the lead time is longer. So
Yeah.
you'll get booked, you'll have nothing in the diary in 3 months' time potentially, and you'll put in that date and you'll accept the in-person, and then the virtual comes in last minute. You're smiling because you've had this
Yep.
happen, and suddenly you get 3 virtuals for the same day, and you're thinking, "Oh, I could do those 3," and yet, and that's a challenge, isn't it? That's gonna be a bit
Yeah.
of a problem.
Let me ask you this one. Do I need to have a speaker website?
Oh, now, well, it depends, James. It depends. So, if you are getting booked and your business is coming from referrals, coming from the fact that you're out on stage and people are seeing you, you probably don't. However, if you're starting out and you're reaching out and you're prospecting, people are going to Google you and investigate you. And if you've got a website, you've got a chance to put out what you want to put out about yourself and represent yourself and your brand in your own way. Personally, I think you should have a website, even if it's just a one page, so that when people come to look for you, they find something. I think it gives you more credibility. But you don't necessarily need one. You don't necessarily need to invest in one. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. I think whether you have or don't have a website is kind of where you are, and also you might have built a huge following on TikTok or YouTube, and that's kind of almost like your website. That's your place. Um, I would say, like for example, like a speaker like Molly Bloom, who's a American speaker. She was made famous in a movie about poker playing, but she's a very in-demand speaker. But I don't think she actually has a website because she works primarily through bureau channels. I think that's maybe a strategy because she primarily wants to go through the bureau channel. So you don't have to. I would say if you're a thought leader, you do need to have some way of getting your message to audiences that doesn't involve you going on stages, and that could be as something as being a featured writer on Medium or Forbes or somewhere else. But for me personally, I'm old fashioned. I like to build my own platform. I consider all these other places, Facebook, Twitter, everywhere else, as rented space, rented ground. I don't own those. They can change the rules. They might not like something I say, and they could remove me. So I always like having the core of everything I produce on the main site, but then spending most of my time on all of these various nodes that are out there.
Absolutely. Brilliant answer. Love that. Thank you so much. So here's a question. We keep talking about him. We mention Jamil all the time because he's doing so well. And here's the question. What does Jamil Qureshi do that he gets so much business? So let me answer that from my experience working with him when I was running my bureau and why we booked him so often. And then I'm sure you'll have something that you can add, James, because you know Jamil as well. So for me, the reason that Jamil got booked so often is, first of all, he is incredibly responsive. So when you're working as a booker, you want a speaker that's responsive. And in fact, he was so responsive, he actually shared his diary with me. So he made it super easy. So if I wanted to talk to a client about him because he was a good fit, I could actually check the diary and say, I know he's available, which means I can move forward so much faster. So that was one thing. And the other thing is, he's an absolute safe pair of hands. And that's so important for bookers, for bureaus, and for clients to know that when you book someone, you're going to get a good result, a great result. And in fact, he should increase his fees. I keep telling him we have done it, but we should do it more. So there'll be people screaming at me, bureau, saying no. But because, and the reason he doesn't, I think, is because when he speaks, the client thinks, wow, we got a bargain. We got a bargain. And that's the other reason he gets booked a lot, because he's a bargain in terms of what he delivers. So those are some of the things. I don't know what experience or what your view might be.
Well, funny, I'm not sure whose question this is, but I actually asked Jamil a very similar question to this yesterday. Jamil and I were having a phone conversation yesterday, and I said, like, he's working nonstop. He's super in demand. He's probably I would say he's probably the top earning of the UK speakers, UK based speakers, who's not a celebrity as well. And he kind of talked around at the different things, and he's very he's kind of got that British understatement as well. But my perspective on just kind of seeing him and having conversations with him, the reason that Jamil Qureshi gets booked so much is because he has clients that he delivers for who then want to book him again. So it's return business. And he's not a speaker that has a leaky bucket. He's also very smart in terms of how he delivers information, that he will go on stage and he'll talk about, I've got these 10 things to talk on this particular topic, but today I'm just going to talk about these 2 things that relate to this, 2 of these 10 things. So then it means he's open to be able to do maybe further up work to focus on those other ones as well. So that's kind of quite smart. You're helping the client to future pace a little bit as well, and showing you have depth of thought leadership. So getting rebookings all the time, I think, is a really key one. And also, it's the Warren Buffett thing. Do business with people that you like working with. And Jamil's fun to work with. And I've given forward stuff to Jamil. Jamil's given work to me. And it's just nice. Some people are like that. They're just enjoyable to work with. There's no stress. There's no hassle. There's no drama, no dramatics. So I think that stands for a lot. In the music industry, we have a phrase for this. We call it hang chops. He's got hang chops, which basically means if you're on a tour bus for 9 months in a band, and if you're bringing a new member into the band, you want to have someone with good hang chops. They're a good to hang out with. They're not a pain in the neck. You're going to have to look at their face for the next 9 months on the other side of that table on that band bus. So you want someone who is just, you enjoy being with. And I think Jamil also ticks that. And so for clients, he's got good hang chops. He's great to hang with. And after the event, before the event, someone you want to spend time with. And the fact you can get him to come speak to your audience is amazing.
You mentioned leaky bucket. You have to explain it because you didn't explain it. Would you explain what you mean by leaky bucket?
So when we talk about a sales funnel or a sales process, most people focus on how to fill the funnel at the top. Basically, if you think of a bucket, you fill the funnel, and the funnel comes from suspects, inquiries, leads. You fill the top of potential inquiries you can get. And then of those, let's say 100 inquiries, you'll come down to maybe 1 or 2 that ends up confirming and gets booked. But what a lot of people do is they put all their attention into the top by getting new inquiries, new leads, and they put none of their effort into thinking, how can I retain those clients that I've just booked with and get them to book me for more? So for example, last year, I worked with one client on over 21 events, one client. So you just have to deliver once really well. And if that client trusts you and it works, and you're a speaker in such a way that you can cover some different areas, then you're making your bucket less leaky, less stuff's likely to go out. So you don't have to continually focus on trying to fill the top of the bucket. You're spending a little bit more time further down the bucket and just plugging those holes. Like, how can I get that person to not just book me once, but book me time and time again? That's me. That's probably not a very good explanation, but that's my kind of take on leaky bucket.
Yeah, you don't want to lose leads. You don't want to lose anything. You need to capture all the information. And yes, absolutely. So here is, how long should a show reel be, and what should it contain and not contain? What would you say, James? What are your thoughts?
So I have three types of show reels that I can consider. One is, I call it a sizzle reel. Usually it's about less than a minute, and it's the idea that you sell the sizzle, not the steak. So you just want to get people's taste buds going, oh, this is interesting, tell me more. Very short is for our short attention spans that we have now, to kind of move you on. Then I think you have a slightly longer one, maybe 3 to 5 minutes, which is kind of talking about the range of things you do, the kind of clients you work with, how you improve your clients' lives and their businesses in some way. And that kind of shows you maybe on some things on stages, maybe little clips, but shorter clips. And then I think you want to have a number of full, you on stage for an hour or 45 minutes. So clients can really see how you work for an actual full speech. So they can see if that you connect with that audience and work there. So I kind of think of these sizzle reel, show reel, and then full video is kind of the way I think of it.
It's interesting that you talk about the steak. I talk about sausage. You say sell the sizzle, not the steak. Obviously, my budget's lower than yours, so you don't want to sell the sausage.
I'm vegan, so it's going to be a tofu steak here, just to let everyone know as well. I don't know what tofu steak is like.
I can't think of anything worse.
Tofurkey.
Oh, okay, fantastic. So going back to my sausages. So for me, a show reel for me, ideally, is a standalone video that tells me enough information, or tells the booker enough information to be able to book you without looking at anything else. So the shorter you can do that, the better. Try to keep it 3 minutes or under. But that for me is the best kind of show reel. When I was a booker, that I knew that if I sent the video, they had enough on there. And so therefore it would include certainly clips of speaking. I've actually been sent show reels in the past where there's no speaking, where there's people on stages and they've just got music. That's no good. I need to hear your voice. So I have to hear your voice, and I have to hear something unique. So when I was a booker, I wanted to hear something unique. I didn't want to hear anything generic. So it should contain something that's really your content, so that it stands out. And I need to be clear, when I finish watching that video, I need to know who you are, what you talk about, that you talk very well. And ideally, I'd like to have a third-party endorsement in there, some kind of testimonial as well, just to help me to make a decision. So that's my view. And I quite like music as well underneath it, but not too loud. I don't want it fighting with your voice, so be careful with your music. So that's my show
What
reel.
about, we hear this phrase sometimes, Maria, a bureau-friendly show reel? What does that mean?
Absolutely. So bureau-friendly show reel will not have your contact details on it. If you put your contact details on your video, what will happen is the bureau will probably cut the end of your video, so it'll stop more abruptly than maybe you've actually edited it to do, or they won't use it. You want to make it as easy as possible. I always say to speakers, have two versions. Have one with your contact details and one without. But then it depends where you're using it. If you're using it on your website only and not sharing in any other way, or on your YouTube, people have got to come there anyway, so they know that it's you. So if in doubt, leave out the contact details. But if you want to put contact details on, keep it super simple and have a version without any for the bureau.
Tell me, what is the worst, you don't have to say who the person is, but what is the worst speaker show reel you've ever seen, and why was it the worst?
The worst one was the one that I saw. That was a speaker being followed around onto different stages, getting onto stage, getting off a stage, all made to music. And for me, it was a music video. It was not a show reel, because I didn't hear a voice. And that's all it was. It just had the name, lots of lovely music, moving different stages, seeing lots of people in the audience, more music. Ended. That was it. It's like none the wiser. None the wiser. Does the person even speak? I don't know. So that was the worst one. Yeah, I've seen a few bad ones, but and it doesn't have to be super expensive to get it right. Let's move on, James,
Yes.
because we've got more questions here. So the
Next
next
one.
one is,
Do you have any tips to using LinkedIn to find prospects?
loads of tips for LinkedIn. I think you'll find that many of your decision makers and bookers are on LinkedIn. So let me give you a simple one. First of all, if you are working with a new client, connect with them on LinkedIn. Make sure you connect with them on LinkedIn. And what will probably happen when you work with that client is you'll end up maybe having a briefing call, and there'll be 3 other people who join that call. Connect with them on LinkedIn. Make sure that you are connecting with as many people as you are dealing with as possible on LinkedIn, and potentially even the audience if you can, if it's permitted, because the deeper you go into the business, the more opportunities for work. Just as James said earlier, that you got 21 gigs from one client. I'm sure that wasn't from speaking to just one person. That was from going deeper into the organization,
Yeah.
which you can do on LinkedIn, of course.
Yeah, I think the other thing, finding prospects, and this is the danger with LinkedIn, there's so many people on it. 99.9999% of people will never book you to speak. Um, they will not be the buyer, the decision maker on that. So for me, I've got the lazy school of LinkedIn prospecting, and basically I go to all of speakers and agents, and I connect. People don't really know, I connect with people in certain positions there, using them, because these are people that I know have a high probability that they'll have already booked a speaker. So they've got budget and they book speakers. And then the other thing I'll do, if you really want to get stalky on it, is go and look at all the testimonials of any speakers. You can look at mine. I don't mind if you want to look at mine. Go to mine and look at the testimonials and look at those people, and then find those people on LinkedIn. Well, because you know that and you go on the speaker's website, do the same thing. If they've got testimonials, Joe Blogs, VP of Ford, find Joe Blogs and VP of Ford. If it relates obviously to your topic and you're a similar kind of speaker, then you can go and do that. So I use LinkedIn we're talking about the bucket further down the funnel, the sales funnel, because I just don't have the people and the teams and the time to go a little bit kind of further up to go and reach out to people who are frankly never going to book a speaker.
I'm so glad you said that it was okay for people to go and look at your
Yeah,
profile, because what you don't know is that when we do our practical prospecting day, I use you as a great example.
good, good.
So we do that.
Stalk away, stalk away.
We stalk you, James. Thank goodness. It's
Great.
okay. So let's move on to the next one. And we have, should I speak for free to get my speaking business started? What are your thoughts, James?
Oh, to get your speaking business started, I would say to get your speaking craft started, yes. Speaking business, a business is not a business unless there's money involved, frankly. It's otherwise it's a non-profit, and that's nothing wrong with that. So I would say speaking for free at the start, absolutely, in terms of learning your craft and developing your speech. And I did loads of Rotary clubs and things like that right at the very beginning, just to see what worked with audiences and to try out different things, and schools. And there's nothing wrong with that. Once you've actually started your business and started to speak, I think you have to make a bit of a decision. I think you can waive your fee as opposed to speaking free. So it's slightly different things. So I don't speak for free, but I'll waive my fee for certain things. I have a number of causes, charities that I support. I'll happily do stuff for them and waive my fee because it's the things I support. Likewise, if there's something that I'm potentially going to get from that engagement that is not a straightforward monetary situation, then I might waive my fee for that as well. Because I'm not really a sell from the stage speaker, it's less applicable to me. But I know lots of speakers who sell from the stage, virtual or in person, who primarily will speak for free or waive their fee. You have access to the databases of the people that are attending and to be able to make some kind of offer as well. So that's another way you speak. I don't, as a business model on its own, it's a particularly good idea. And I can't buy cat food with like thumbs ups and stuff like that. So for my cat, so it doesn't really work as a long-term prospect. But I think if you want to waive your fee for certain things, I think it's fine. And also I think it could be get comfortable in saying no to it as well. And if you want, give a reason why you're saying no. And you can be nice in how you do it. You don't have to be nasty in how you do it. But if a venue, if a promoter is spending $10,000 on their AV team, you have to ask why they're not paying their speakers, for example. So that's just my take.
This is one that this topic of, should I speak for free gets quite a lot of response from people. They get very passionate about it. And I think you're so right. You have to speak for free to develop your craft. I don't think it's fair to charge while you're still learning. As long as if you're giving value, then absolutely okay. But you probably wouldn't charge your full fee until you are at a certain level. I think there are times where you will speak for free, and I do encourage speakers to have a reason why they might. It might be for marketing purposes because that audience is going to potentially give them some further bookings down the line. But if you do that, I agree with you, James. You waive your fee. So you send an invoice and a credit note. Say, this is my fee, but here's a credit note. And this is why I'm doing it, because this is what you're going to give me back. And you still treat it as a proper booking. So there are times when you would. And once your business has started, I think there are certain clients where you will still speak for free, and you might do a certain number per year, because you probably don't want to charge charities. You probably don't want to charge certain organizations, and you might allocate a certain number of dates a year where you will speak for free. And once those are full, they then go on the waiting list for the following year. But certainly, I think there are times when you should. So let's see if we've got
for example, on that, just a quick, and I can't remember if it was you. I think it was maybe another bureau owner I spoke to. Was she receives a lot of inquiries around International Women's Day, and these come from a lot of clients, for people and banks and big clients who are looking for women speakers to speak for free for International Women's Day. And she's now made a point saying, absolutely no, and I think they're being extremely cheeky there as well. I think it's quite nice. I've actually got a script that I've got for my team and I. If we get those types of inquiries, and it's not fit, then we have a script, a nice way of saying it. Something to watch out for and be very aware of this as a new speaker just getting started is not even those clients that want you to speak for free, but want you to pay to speak. Be very, very cautious on that. And we could go into a different world there, but there are conference organizers, people like that, because they say we're going to get you in front of the right audience, going to be right exposure. There's a word that they'll use to certain types of audiences. And I would be very, very reticent about doing those.
Okay, you heard it here first, everybody, that James has a script when he's invited to speak for International Women's Day that his team uses to say that he's not going to do it. Okay, it's what you said, James. So we've got it on tape. I might use that. So final question from Michael. Michael's done very well. Thank you, Michael. What is the share of your speakers for whom speaking is core business and income, and the rest who do it only as a side business? So, wow. I think you're probably referring to when I had my bureau, and I've never done that analysis. But in many bureaus, a lot of the speakers are doing speaking as a side thing. A lot of them. So especially if they are economists or academics or business people who are still in a role, it's a side thing for them, and it's a very lucrative side thing, but they're giving great value. And then in terms of speakers where it's 100% speaking, it's probably it's actually probably a lower number in bureaus, because you tend to find that many of the speakers who are 100% speaking will be getting a lot of their business themselves. And then you've got the rare one that's different. So Jamil is a different animal because he's got a different business structure. But it's difficult to put a number on it because every speaker is different, every bureau is different. So I don't think I've answered that very well.
No, I think it's a hard one because there's so many variables. The first person that came to mind, who many people would think of as a speaker because he's an amazing speaker, is Phil M. Jones from the UK, now lives in the States most of the time. And Phil, when I've interviewed Phil about this as well, so it's on record, he talks about the keynote part, the speaking part, as being the cherry on the cake, not the cake. The cake is he's got a training business, train the trainer business. He's a great author as well. So he puts the speaking there, but most people probably consider him a speaker as his main thing. But if you look at his totality of his income and how he spends his time, it's actually a smaller part. But he has a full-time thought leader, I guess, which is going to be different if you're, let's say, someone like a Marianne Mazzucato, who's a wonderful economist, who she'll make probably most of her money as a consultant to national governments and being on boards and things. And speaking is really it's just a kind of thing that she does in order to spread her message around her books as well. And that's a very different type of business model. I think you see a lot of those with bureaus, that speaking isn't the main
It's the main thing, yeah, and that's why they use bureaus all the time. And actually, I should correct myself, because Jamil, of course, still does performance coaching, and he also does a lot of consultancy. So even he's not a full-time. So probably, if you're speaking about bureaus, it probably is a side thing more than the main thing, if we're going to answer it properly. Right.
Great.
Well, goodness, we
And
got
thank you,
through.
Michael. Thank you for all your questions. There are great questions in here as well. And thanks everyone else. I mean, it's been fantastic. Richard, Abdi, Sarah, and we've got Raleigh here as well. We've had some wonderful questions. So let us know if you want us to do this kind of thing again. If you're like this little kind of Q&A, let us know, and maybe we can do a little bit more of this in the future.
Fantastic, James. Thank you so much. I think we've earned our rest now. Have a lovely rest of day, and let me just find my closing music.
Yeah, everyone.
She says, "Oh, totally relaxed." Bye, everybody.
Take care. Bye-bye.